U.S. Chapter 10, Section 3, Wilson, War and Peace. How did Americans affect the end of World War I and its peace settlements? So by the end of this section, how the U.S. military contributed to Allied victory in the war. What were the aims and goals of Wilson's 14 points? Analyze the decisions made at the Paris Peace Conference, and then why the U.S. Senate refused to ratify the treaty ending World War I. So when we look at Americans, one of the key things that we do early on is we are going to help protect convoys, and we create this new system for this convoy that's going to cut down on shipping losses, which means more supplies are going to get to the Allies, and that's going to help them do better in the war. So this is to prevent German U-boats or submarines from sinking these things. The other key part of American involvement is the United States is going to enter the war at the same time Russia is dropping out of the war. And what this map is showing is that after Russia drops out, Germany is able to take all of its troops from the Eastern Front and combine them with their troops at the Western Front, and that is going to cause an awful lot of problems. So had the United States not entered when it did, the war probably, well, it could have been over a lot sooner, because Germany was hoping to have the war won before the United States could get their troops there. So when we look at allies giving the edge, like I said, we're entering just as the Russian troops are leaving and Germany is able to do this. But the other thing about American troops in terms of distinguishing themselves is the United States shows up when everybody else is pretty much sick and tired of war. They've been fighting it for years and years and years. And here American troops come in and they're fresh, they're excited, they're ready to fight. So even though they are unprepared or ill-prepared for the kind of warfare that they're experiencing, their enthusiasm makes up for their lack of experience. And so a handful of them, especially like Alvin York's probably the most famous, really get known for their bravery and their courage and their just get after itness, I guess. And when you look at this, the United States really, in terms of troops presence, really increases the number of troops that are in Europe at the beginning of 1918. And by November of 1918, the war is over. So it kind of shows how we're entering as this is kind of drawing to a close, but how American involvement really accelerates the end of the war. When we look at Wilson's 14 points, Wilson does kind of listen a little bit to Vladimir Lenin's views that Vladimir Lenin believed that World War I was all about this imperialistic land grab, that all of these European countries were trying to get more and more and more land, and that's what caused all of the conflict. So Wilson is really going to try and figure out how can I promote peace and freedom around the world, and that's what his 14 points are designed to do, and you can see them all listed there. A lot of them are trying to avoid the things that he believed led up to World War I, but also those things that he thinks are going to promote peace after. His ultimate goal is to avoid punishing anybody. Let's just all get in this. His ultimate goal is not to punish anybody. Let's just get in this, let's work together, and let's try and figure out how to make a world that is going to be a more peaceful one. This is part of the reason why he wanted the United States to get involved in the war in the first place, is he really believed that he had created a peace that would be lasting and enduring and help make the world a better place. This is so important that he is going to himself go overseas to negotiate this. And we're going to see for the first time a president really getting involved overseas in these peace negotiations. That just hadn't been done before. When we look at Wilson at the Paris Peace Conference, pretty early on what he is going to realize is that Allied leaders are not interested in creating world peace. What they're interested in is protecting their own individual interests, and that's what this political cartoon is showing. The other thing is that it's pretty apparent early on that the other Allied leaders are intent on punishing Germany for this, and that France's ultimate goal is to weaken Germany for the rest of history so that they can never be the aggressor again. So bit by bit, little by little, you see these 14 points being thrown out the window as countries are pursuing their own personal interests. The only thing that's really left by the end of things is the 14 points. And so this is going to be a Paris Peace Conference that is not interested in peace. It's not interested in preserving any kind of long-term stability. It's about getting what they wanted. It was exclusionary from the very beginning. Russia and Germany weren't allowed to take part. And so this is going to be a dictated peace from really Great Britain and France mostly, and then somewhat the United States. So this is really going to create instability in Europe. When we look at what gets done, you get a handful of people who think they understand the world who are going to draw new world maps, and they really don't know what's going on, and they have a poor understanding of the places around the world, especially in the Middle East. And when we look at kind of the thing that caused the problem in the first place, Central Europe, they really don't do a very good job of paying attention to ethnic differences, to religious differences. So they create these countries that are poorly thought out. When they divide up Germany, they're going to end up putting Germans into non-German lands, and that's going to provide some ammunition for Hitler a little bit later on to be able to make the argument that he is only trying to take over land that had been lost and it contained Germans anyway, and that they rightfully belong to Germany. And so later on, when we get into the 1930s, we see this poorly thought out peace plan leading into World War II. Now, the other thing is when we look at Iraq and the Middle East today, many of these countries are thrown together based on what these foreign powers wanted. So the British and the French, and these are the places, Iraq, Syria, if you look at, for example, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, these are all places that are currently problems or the United States is kind of dealing with. And a lot of this goes to the 1920s and this Paris Peace Conference and this lack of understanding of the places that they're dealing with and maybe what they could do to try and make countries that made a lot more sense than what they created. When we look at the U.S. Senate, really Wilson is facing a couple different things at home. One is there's a number of people who are upset by how things ended after World War I. The Irish are upset that Ireland didn't get its independence from Great Britain. German Americans are upset by the peace agreement and the things that have been done with Germany and blaming Germany as part of the problem. When you look at the Senate, there's two different groups of people within the Senate. You have the irreconcilables. These are the people who say Article 10 of the League of Nations violates the U.S. Constitution because the League of Nations requires member nations to provide troops in the case of any kind of war around the world. And they say that that violates Congress's ability to declare war. So they're not going to accept this peace agreement because of the League of Nations, no matter what. The reservationists say if you make some small to medium changes with this peace agreement, especially the piece where America has to provide troops, they'd be willing to support it. Wilson decides that he is going to try and take his case to the American people, that he's going to try and prove that the U.S. Senate is wrong on this, and he's going to work tirelessly to try and get the American people to pressure the Senate and the House of Representatives, Congress, to accept this peace agreement. And he's going to work himself to the bone and to the point where he's actually going to suffer a stroke in the process of trying to get the American people on board with this. Ultimately, the Senate's going to reject this treaty because Wilson is unwilling to compromise. He just will not give in. He felt like he had given in enough and that he needed to hold true to the rest of this. And when we look at the League of Nations, it's going to be doomed from the very beginning because the United States creates this thing, the United States designs this thing, but the United States, along with like Germany and Russia, are the only countries that don't belong. And we are kind of the key piece to this puzzle to make the League of Nations work. And so it's kind of doomed from the very beginning.